episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation? Welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor. It is the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And a very interesting panel before us tonight. We are getting back into the Alexander brothers story. For those who are not familiar with it, there's a set of twins and another brother. The twins are Orrin and Alone. The third brother, who is 1 year older, is Tal. They're all under the age of 40. Last check, the twins were 37 and Tal 38. They were all arrested separately here where I am in Miami Beach back on December 11th. And as they were being arrested here, not unlike what happened with Sean Diddy Combs, their houses elsewhere in New York City, namely, were being raided by the FBI, and some interesting stuff, which we're going to discuss, was collected at Tal's New York City apartment. The charges, they range from the R word, which you can't really say on YouTube, to SA, which you can't really say on YouTube, and sex trafficking. For some reason, I think you can, as well as drugging women. And this has apparently gone on from 2001 or 2002 all the way through 2021, and possibly longer than that. A bunch of civil suits were filed over the summer, and that kind of opened up the floodgates, and more than 40 women have come forward. This is a look at the brothers here. You've got Tal and Orrin, who ran a very successful real estate business out of New York City. They were big stars at Douglas Elliman, a very well-known firm, and then leaving to start their own firm called Official. Well, now they're officially, from what we understand, at MDC Brooklyn, with fellow inmates Sean Diddy Combs, Sam Bankman-Friedman, Luigi Mangione. The list goes on. Last week, a suit against the brothers was tossed, which we're going to discuss momentarily. Today, or not today, but in the last few days, a new civil suit was filed, one thrown out, a new one filed, and there's a lawsuit related to the business as well. Without further ado, best guest joining us again is Maria. Maria's in silhouette because she claims that she was victimized by Orrin Alexander and told us her story last week, and she's here to speak out some more. And maybe the attorneys have questions for her. Maybe she has questions for the attorneys. We thought it would be a good idea to bring her back, and she obliged. Next up, you're looking at a first-time best guest. I'm sure he'll be back on already. I can tell that. His name is Jordan Merson. He's ranked as one of the top lawyers in New York City and the United States. He focuses on cases involving injured children, grappling with issues ranging from birth injuries and medical malpractice to the harrowing aftermath of SA. He is dubbed the trial lawyer to the stars. He's gone up against the likes of Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein. You may have heard of these guys: Bill Cosby, Larry Nassar, the infamous doctor for the gymnastics team, and the list goes on. And last but not least, a very formidable defense attorney, criminal defense attorney, Ronald Richards, out of Beverly Hills, California. He also has a license in Washington, D.C. We came upon him because he is covering this story on his own Instagram page, which is attorney Ronald Richards. Just real quickly, before we get going, just a moment. Today is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. For those who follow the show, they know that my mother is a child survivor. This is her, my kids, and me and my mom all the way on the right. We, as you know, I've written a book about her, same title as a podcast, Surviving the Survivor, which is 20% this story, the Holocaust story, 80% her yelling at me and giving me life advice. She is the host emeritus of the show, the matriarch of the family. That's her with her father. Her father, 80 years ago, roughly, was murdered by the Nazis, gassed in Auschwitz. He has no tombstone. We went to visit my great-grandfather's tombstone, which is what my kids are looking at there, putting stones on the headstone, which is Jewish tradition. And since he was incinerated, they only have his name on that headstone. That is all that remains of him. The picture on the bottom left is my mother, Carm, in the middle, my grandmother on the left, my great-grandmother on the right, and then the photo top middle is my father, my grandfather, excuse me, my mother's father, and my grandmother before he was taken from us. He was only 32 years old. He looks a lot older. I think people aged a little faster there, but in those days. But and then the picture on the right is an interesting photo. My mother was saved by a Catholic nun in a school for boys and by a non-Jewish doctor, Dr. Scherzer, and that right there is the front entrance to the Catholic school, which we went back to visit. No longer a Catholic school, but it is an important day to remember. And some members of STS Nation reached out as well. I'm not going to give a name. They asked me not to, but this is one person within STS Nation who's here all the time who visited Auschwitz in the early 80s. So it is International Remembrance Day. It is 80 years later, and just want everyone to know who was affected by this, which was a lot of people, and not just Jewish people. That we are thinking about all of them today. Now on to the story at hand. Before we get there, Jordan, let me ask you this. I mean, you represent victims of very high-profile people. We just went through the list: Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein. Can you tell us how you got involved here and how many people you're representing at this point?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on, and hello to everyone out there. I got involved in these cases the same way that we get involved in all the high-profile cases. There's someone that has seen the work that we've done, and we're put in touch, or people just read up on the news and see that we've done a lot of great work in a lot of high profile cases. And so they reach out to us. As far as how many of these cases, we're looking at a number of claims. I can tell you at present, we represent at least one survivor. But I respect all their privacy. And until we come out publicly, I won't divulge.
Yeah. Just let me ask you this. The stories that are out there now. More than 40 victims have come forward. Your client's story, does it line up basically with other stories that we've heard?
More or less, yes.
More or less. There you go. Maria, I'm going to have to unmute Maria. Maria's got a little bit of an audio crackle going on. But Maria, I just want to open it up. You've got one attorney who's actively representing these victims, and or at least one victim right now, and I'm sure it'll be more. And then you've got Ronald Richards, who's covering this. He's a very savvy attorney in his own right, but he happens to be covering it on Instagram at attorney Ronald Richards. Do you have any questions for either of them?
No, not at this time.
We last spoke last week. What was your reaction now that you've had some time to digest it, being able to speak about it publicly, which I know you've done a couple other times, but podcasting is a little different because you get comments. Did you have a chance to look at the comments? How do you feel in the aftermath? I assume it wasn't horrible because you're back here today, but did it help at all in any way?
Yes, I absolutely looked at the comments, and I think everybody, they were so supportive, very kind words, and I really appreciate it. I'm very, very happy to have read those comments. So thank you very much.
Okay.
And
well,
yes, of course, I feel much better.
Excellent. I think I'm just gonna keep you unmuted because it's not interfering. And if you have anything you want to jump in with, this platform is yours, so feel free to do that. Ronald Richards, let's get to the news here. There was a civil suit that was dismissed last week. It was brought obviously by an alleged victim. The judge, a guy named Lewis Kaplan, federal district court in Manhattan, he basically dismissed it on a technicality. The woman's name is out there publicly, Angelica Parker. At the time, her last name was Sikora. She's now 38 years old. And basically, the judge said, look, you filed this too late. There's statute of limitations. Boom. Can't move forward. Now, her attorney came out and said, we're going to find a way to bring it back. But Ronald Richards, what about the statute of limitations on cases like this? Is it a hard and fast rule? Is this alleged victim unable to do anything now? Will this lawyer find a way? What do you think?
Well, there was also a civil suit brought in Florida a week ago too. I mean, these victims aren't without recourse. They could also file a restitution claim if there's a conviction. So it's not that they don't have any other way of getting
explain the restitution claim versus, I guess, a traditional civil suit.
Well, a civil suit is obviously if the plaintiff wins, they get money. In a criminal case, any victim could claim restitution from the defendant, and the defendant would have to pay for losses. But typically, they don't get, punitive damages or basically special damages. So in a restitution, it's to cover actual losses. So if this victim needed therapy or had other losses that they can demonstrate, they're not out of the woods. As far as the statute argument on the civil case, they can argue equitable tolling. They can argue other ways that the statute clock may have stopped if they were out of state. I mean, there's ways, but it may be too late for some of them, when they have these old cases from the civil side. But like I said, they can go to the criminal. There was some news. There was a late filing shortly before we came on air. So when you want me to talk about that, I could address that too.
Please. I have some. We're going to go to the latest civil suit, but what's the news, Ronald?
Well, in the criminal case, as we predicted, they dumped almost all of their Miami legal team. There was a status conference set for the 29th, and now they want to move it to the 12th, saying that they've been in solitary, their legal papers weren't with them, and they want to interview New York counsel. Remember, we discussed that it was a big mistake with all these out-of-town counsel, didn't know the judge. Maybe they've been listening because now they want to just hire New York counsel, one out-of-state counsel, and they want to revamp everything because obviously those bail hearings were poorly put together, as we discussed.
Yeah, and so the three brothers were supposed to be in court. You're hearing this first right here.
Literally happened minutes before we got on air. You're definitely, and I also put things on our X page at Ronald Richards. That it usually goes there first and then over to the IG page.
Yeah, and Ronald's all over this. So again, on X, it is at Ronald Richards, and on Instagram, it's at attorney Ronald Richards. But you just heard what he said. Looks like the Alexander brothers have dumped most of their Miami counsel and are now looking for counsel in New York City. And the three were supposed to appear in court, but it looks like they want to push that back. Ronald, is it safe to say that all three are firmly within MDC Brooklyn? Do we know that to be a fact?
Well, they're never going to discuss their exact location, but I think they're there now. I think that's where they are.
And by the way, from what I read, they were taking a bus, and at one point, one of them was in Oklahoma City. It is not a straight route, trip up from Miami to New York City. And everyone I talked to, for whatever reason, say that the transport buses are the worst, and took them, at least 5 days or so, from what I understand, to finally get up to New York. Back to, and obviously we do have Maria, who's she alleges to be a victim of Orrin, and I'm going to get back to her in a few minutes. And again, Maria, feel free to jump in anytime. But Jordan, how tough are these cases from your perspective in terms of civil litigation? Does it oftentimes just come down to, which might be the case in the criminal court as well, does it come down to he said, she said, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, I mean, look, you ideally you want there to be more than he said, she said, but he said, she said can be okay. I mean, we've been very successful on cases where there's limited, substantiation or corroborating evidence. But in most of these cases, you're able to have a lot of them are pretty recent. You're talking like 2010s. I mean, my firm has litigated cases for conduct that took place in the 1940s. So when you have sexual or SA that's taken place in more recent times, a lot of times you're able to get corroboration, and it's not, that different than what Ronald may deal with in, more in his domain. But, you could speak with friends, you could speak with other people who were there that night, medical records, psychiatric records, those kinds of things, in addition to what you may expect, pictures and stuff like that. So, I think for the most part, these cases are not he said, she said. But even if they are, I mean, ultimately a jury would have to determine which side is more credible. They'll hear, the plaintiff's side of the story, and they'll hear the defendant's side of the story, assuming that the defendants are denying what they did, which they seem to be up to this point.
Interesting. I love how measured these lawyers are. They take the emotion out of it. I can't be that way because I'm a volatile human being. But I'm not sure if that's Ronald or Jordan. But if you guys can bounce those notifications off, that'd be great, because I'll get yelled at for that by many people. Shaquille Oatmeal, the best name in all the YouTubes. We are actually launching, I don't know how or why, a second channel tomorrow. That's going to be comprised of best guests. We are rolling it out slowly. COE is hosting a show on there, and has instructed me that I'm going to co-host with her tomorrow for this kickoff, the inaugural event here on the second channel. It is going to be modeled after basically sports talk radio, except with video. So it's going to be true crime talk, best talk in true crime. And Doug McGregor, the geo profiler, Rob D'Amico, and Dr. Detective Troy Looney will be amongst the first to launch their own shows. So best guests with their own shows, and we're going to build it up slowly but surely, and that is starting tomorrow. So here's the link. If you're interested or not interested, please hit the subscribe button. So back to this suit that was tossed out. This victim, again, her name is out there publicly, but she claims that she was SA'd in Manhattan by both Tal and Alone in the fall of 2012. During the act, when this was going on, according to this person, Orrin Alexander watched the other two brothers. Let me just stop right there. Maria, I know some of this can be triggering for you, so please tell us if it's just too much. But when you hear this, that it was Tal and Alone who are basically attacking a single woman, and then Orrin, who you were allegedly attacked by, what's your reaction to hearing this?
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised that they attacked the woman.
Are you surprised that, I mean, it's this depraved that it's the two brothers, and then the third brother, who's a twin of one of the other brothers, is sitting there watching? Does that, like, what about that aspect?
From everything that I read right now, no, I'm not surprised. It's very, very scary.
I guess, Jordan, back to you on this. If you have in a civil case, let's just stick with the civil for now, but you have a victim like Maria who comes forward and testifies to this. I mean, it's incredibly powerful, and obviously the other side's going to do everything to diminish the credibility. But how do the Alexander brothers get around this kind of testimony? And it's going to come in like in like a deluge of testimony. Some of these cases potentially, I guess, could be tried together. I don't know. You can let us know about that. But this testimony is going to be very, very damning against the brothers. Jordan, that's for you.
Yeah. So sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got you. Yep.
Okay. So how can the Alexander brothers deal with that? I mean, they'll try to undermine the credibility of the plaintiffs, which, it depends on whether the plaintiffs have anything to be undermined with. So they try to find something that will make the jury less likely to believe them. You saw what they did in that other decision. They said that the woman who came forward was a serial plaintiff, and they were trying to make her story seem dubious, which, was referred to in the decision. But really, for a motion to dismiss, that sort of credibility determination is not really what's done at that point in time. That's only a jury can make a credibility determination. A judge is just supposed to analyze the law. And, whether the plaintiff has been a victim of SA repeatedly or not is ultimately a question that the jury will have to determine. And, for me, unfortunately, someone who's the victim of this type of conduct finds themselves, unfortunately, in similar positions. For some reason, there's a psychology behind it, which is I don't know if we want to go down that rabbit hole here, but, so I'm never, I'm just because someone has certain things that can undermine their credibility doesn't mean they're not being truthful. And ultimately our job, as plaintiffs' lawyers is to bring forward, viable claims and claims that have merit. And obviously my firm takes that very seriously. But there are ways that you can use to determine someone's credibility so that when they are cross-examined, whether it be in a deposition or during trial, that they will be able to withstand that cross-examination.
Yeah. And to Jordan's point, so this was a civil suit that was dismissed last week by, I guess, a federal circuit judge. But this woman, again, you just heard Jordan say it, the lawyers for the Alexander brothers labeled her a quote-unquote professional plaintiff, and accused her and other women of come forward with allegations of assault, of a cash grab. Now, this woman did previously sue Oscar De La Hoya, the infamous boxer, for battery, assault, and false imprisonment. But Maria, just back to you on this one. The lawyer is saying, and you know that I spoke to Howard Shrebnick, who is a criminal defense attorney here, and he said, all these people are lying, including you, Maria. How insulting is that to you, particularly because you say you're a victim of these brothers?
Mm-hmm. It's very, very insulting. It's disgusting that he would say that all the victims are lying, not credible. It's I have no words.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that because I've dealt with this pathology. I agree with Jordan. What people don't realize is, and I've defended plenty of people like this, is they prey on women that are more vulnerable. It's not like they pick an independent, sort of less malleable victim. So the fact that they may have had another victimization doesn't mean that they're lying in this particular instance. I mean, that's the type of personality that predators look for. So that the fact that they've had prior incidents is actually sometimes consistent with the fact that they're a victim, because they're what we would call an easy mark. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. You've got the Kung Fu movie going on. Ronald, you're very out of sync, Ronald. So I don't know if you want to try to go out and come back in. Yeah, we'll see what happens there. But Jordan, you had a thought. Go ahead.
No. And interestingly, Ronald came through very clear on mine, which usually is not the case. If there's someone's feed who is a problem, it's usually I'm the first to go. But what I would say is, whether you see it with child victims or adult survivor victims, the people who are the perpetrators, many of them know what they're doing. It's not their first time acting in this manner, and they will target people who are more susceptible to this kind of conduct. And so I'm agreeing with Ronald saying he did a good job, flushing out my point. And now I'm going to kind of piggyback on his, because he's absolutely right that, unfortunately, these are the type of people that they're looking for. But also, when we had claims against Jeffrey Epstein, they were more, he was a brilliant manipulator. He did use force at times, but he was very good at manipulating his victims. And that's a little bit different than what we're seeing, as we've alleged in the complaints against Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby would he has been widely stated in the media, drugged many of his victims. And, as we allege in the complaint. So you're seeing different ways of going at it. And when you have women who are drugged, their history, none of it matters. They just become prey, unfortunately. And this is, when they get away with it once, they think they can get away with it again.
Marvin's mom coming to us from the UK. Maria, I think we kind of addressed this last time, but good to rehash this one. What would you say to the other victims, particularly this one who had her civil suit tossed out because of a technicality with the statute of limitations? What would you want to say to her or others?
That I support them. I believe them. Yeah, I'm sorry, that unfortunately, because of the statute of limitations, I had the same thing in Florida. I contacted an attorney, but, she told me that unfortunately, because of statute of limitations, I can't do anything as well. So, hopefully, there can be another way that justice will be served.
Wesley John Holmes, he's an Aussie living in Tokyo. It's just a defense default position. That's all they've got. Pathetic. And that is basically shaming the victim, which is what we were talking about earlier on. So Jordan, back to you. And I know Ronald's trying to get back in because I can see him sort of behind the scenes here. Bree is in the chat. She is always here, friend of the show, very astute, legal mind. I don't think she's a lawyer, but she still follows everything that's going on. But she said she doesn't think she could sit on a jury panel for a case like this. So it's an interesting point. What are you looking for in a voir dire process in these types of cases?
You're looking for a lot, and we could spend the rest of our time here explaining what we would look for.
Explain some of it.
And so in the case that we took to trial back in 2018, Gloria G, which was a Westchester Supreme case. And I'm sorry, I shut off the notifications. I don't know what the problem is, but I jinxed it by saying my feed was working. Yes. But in that particular case of Gloria G versus Mount Vernon School District, it took us almost 2 full weeks to pick a jury. So it can be very difficult. And what are we looking for? We're looking for people who can be fair and impartial. We're looking for people who will give survivors a chance. There are some people who don't think these types of cases should exist. There are some people who think that most survivor victims are not being truthful and they're just coming forward in the civil claims for, a quote unquote money grab. So we're looking to obviously, I always say, I don't need jurors who are pro plaintiff. I just don't want jurors who are pro defense. I just want fair jurors because we believe in our cases. We believe in the survivors that we represent. And, as long as we have fair people, I feel confident that we're going to prevail. So, that's kind of like the 20,000 foot view answer. But, I can tell you what we definitely don't want. And we don't want people who are biased against survivors, because as I think Maria will tell you, it's hard to come forward. And that's why I think the statute of limitations defense in these types of cases is completely inappropriate, and why a lot of states have gotten rid of the statute of limitations. And to have the, twist, kind of like twisted reasoning to knock out a claim on the statute of limitations, I first of all, I think it's not in accord with the law in New York State, as set forth by the First Department Appellate Division. But I also just don't. It's the entire spirit of the law. Why would the city of New York create a law that just couldn't be used? It just doesn't make any sense. So, I agree, obviously, with the lawyer who's represented the survivor and faced that.
Yeah. Ronald, I'm going to, after this question, the answer, I'm going to keep you muted because now there's a weird audio thing coming off your mic. But
are you sure it's my mic? Because I'm in perfect shape now on a new computer.
Sounding good, but you know what? Now it's just cleared up here all of a sudden. But
yeah, no, I should be fine. I switched computers.
All right, there you go. So we talked about the statute of limitations with this particular case that was tossed out, and now we're going to move on to the next thing. This happened allegedly in the fall of 2012. She would have had to file the claim by 2019. What's interesting here, Ronald, is that extensions were added in recent years. It says that Ms. Parker filed her claim during a window created by New York City, but the judge found that a state extension superseded it, requiring Ms. Parker to file her lawsuit by the end of 2023. He tossed the suit as a result. I got confused by this because it sounds like the state extended it, but still it was tossed. What's going on here with these extensions?
Well, I mean, typically a city cannot set forth a uniform tort throughout the state. That's kind of unusual. So I think what the judge was just simply saying is that once the state, this happens a lot, by the way, to give the viewers in rent control, like sometimes cities, especially in California, like Santa Monica, will go crazy and say you can't evict anybody. And then the state will say, no, wait a minute. We're not going to have, the People's Republic of Santa Monica prevent all evictions. So we're going to enact a uniform law. And if there's a conflict between what happens in Sacramento that affects the whole state versus a locality, the court's going to look at what happened if there's a what's called a supremacy issue. And so I think the judge, by the way, it doesn't help the victim in this case that she's in federal court, because even when I was in federal court this morning, the judge was like, if I could figure out a way to throw out this case, I would. I mean, federal judges like to throw out cases. They got a lot of cases. And so Judge Kaplan, by the way, he's not a bad draw for victims. He's I think he was involved, I believe, with the Trump case. I mean, he's not exactly a bad judge, but statute of limitations, they do serve a purpose. It's easy to not forget that at some point we have to have finality. But with these type of offenses, I agree with Jordan. People take a long time. They sometimes may not want to come forward. And then when there's a suspect or a defendant that they see other victims have come forward, that's when they get the courage to say, I'm going to be now put in this position. And that's obviously doesn't mean they're all jumping on a bandwagon. And on the flip side, it does happen sometimes, like in any case, you're going to have opportunists that don't have credibility, but that's why we have a trial and that's why there's discovery. And there's I would say lately there's been a big push to get rid of or extend these statute of limitations to where in a lot of cases they're so long, they're longer than most offenses. And that's just because society has recognized that these type of claims are embarrassing and not everybody can come forward and someone that sheds light on a pattern. And what I found in all the Alexander victims and reading all the complaints and the allegations the government made in their bail hearings, I mean, the signature of these offenses is extremely similar. And it's not just these victims reading what's going on in a newspaper. They've already been interviewed. And the one thing that I do feel corroborates their position is you have all these WhatsApp messages where they're coordinating the purchase of intoxicating, what we would call date rape drugs, even though that's a sort of a big vernacular, but these are strong drugs that either adults take because they want to get really high and have sex, or the perpetrator, gives these drugs surreptitiously or gives them to a victim that may not appreciate the potency of these type of narcotics. And you have these crazy WhatsApp messages where the Alexander brothers are actually upset if people were giving the girls drugs that would keep them more lucid. And I think that's the most damning evidence of intent. And when these victims all say they were lied to, they were put in rooms under false pretenses, they were lured to houses and then told to come upstairs with a ruse or with a lie, these are all very signature type conduct that's corroborated by the text messages. So this is an unusual series of cases where their pattern evidence is highly documented. And I think that that's a unique facet of this case. And so the statute of limitations should not be a way to prevent a victim from getting redress on a legitimate tort claim, or if they're part of a longer criminal case. And then I will just lastly say, to balance this out, you did see the Weinstein conviction reversal because you had a lot of uncharged victims. Hopefully, the lesson will be learned is that you need to charge the victim so they are actually part of the criminal case and not just pattern evidence.
Oh, that's very interesting. Ned Smith, friend of the show. I disagree with the statute of limitations on sex crimes of all types. I would tend to agree with that. Jordan, I'm not sure if you can divulge this or not, but we do know that the feds raided the brothers' residences in New York. In Tall's apartment, they found photos, video evidence that's apparently very damning, and also digital forensic evidence, as in text messages. Can you tell us if the client you're representing has given you any of these sorts of pieces of evidence to present at a future potential trial?
So what I can tell, I can generally say that my firm, we strongly prefer to take on cases that have documentary corroboration.
I love Jordan's delivery here. I'll take that as a yes if I'm reading between the lines. Nicole Luongo, another friend of the show. Interesting question to you, Jordan, since you do this often and you're going against some powerful people that, I hope it never happens, but could make people disappear, I guess, potentially. What's the emotional toll on attorneys who take on SA victims' cases? And thank you for defending them. What's that like for you? Is it stress? It's got to be high stress.
Yeah, Nicole, thanks for thinking of that. Usually no one thinks of that. But I would say, look, this line of work, it's very, very challenging because, you want to succeed so badly for your clients. But it's also very rewarding. If you go on our webpage, our client reviews, that people are just so happy when we're successful for them, that it really keeps you going. But when you hear this type of conduct, and one of the worst cases was the Boy Scouts of America bankruptcy, where 82,000 men, mostly men, came forward who were sexually abused as boys. Just to see such rampant sexual abuse, it really was just so, I don't want to say eye-opening because it's not a powerful enough term, but it really was just, it scraped into your soul. And it was very, very difficult to hear, just story after story. And, it's not much different than what we see in our Catholic Church cases, or even in the Epstein cases, where, at different times we've represented up to 36 survivors. And most of the women we represent are just such wonderful people, and whose lives have been, they didn't do anything wrong, and their lives are just shattered. And, you go up against different institutions, even, we have a claim against the FBI for not acting, even though we say they had information to act. And, I'm happy with the side I'm on, is the long way of saying that. I wouldn't want to be on the other side saying, oh, these women shouldn't get anything. Oh, these women don't deserve anything. Or whatever other defenses they can come up. We're not responsible, So
yeah, well, kudos to you. And, a lot of people like to denigrate attorneys, but the work you're doing, I think, is incredibly important. Speaking of, attorneys, Tal's attorney is a woman named Deanna Paul. Here's a quote, Maria. This one's for you. Maria, by the way, says that Orrin Alexander attacked her at the Versace mansion in Miami Beach. She's spoken publicly to some local media here and was on our show last week, and we wanted to invite her back with these two attorneys. But the attorney, Maria, for Tal Alexander says, in regards to this suit that was just dismissed, here's her quote: "There's been a domino effect of so-called accusers who, after reading about a flurry of lawsuits seeking sums of money, have emerged with never before heard claims. This frivolous lawsuit highlights the opportunism we've seen at play and puts an end to it." That's very harsh, Maria. It's also coming from a woman. What do you make of that particular? What do you make of that particular quote?
I'm very disappointed. Very disappointed that, like you say, it is coming from a woman as well. This is some of the reasons why some victims don't want to come out, because they get accused, they get blamed. And yeah, very disappointing.
Yeah.
And
this is not the. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jordan.
No, if I could just add to that, just listen to the words again that were said. And I believe this lawyer has been with the district attorney's office in the sex crimes unit. But if you listen to the way she said, this is a frivolous claim. It was not frivolous. Frivolous would be it never happened, right? This was determined to be thrown out, I think, as you aptly put it, on a legal technicality. And, listening to Ronald try to make sense where it was this, the city had a rule and then the state came in and decided that they were going to, deal with this area. But then after that all happened, the city came back and said, now we want a window. So I think the entire line of reasoning, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And this isn't a frivolous case. It's like when Bill Cosby got out of jail, vindicated. He wasn't vindicated. He got out on a technicality.
Yeah. 100%.
There's a big difference between the two. I hope I'm explaining it.
No. Yeah. 100%. I agree with you.
A frivolous case would be, it never happened. Then I agree. If it never happened, that's a case that shouldn't be brought.
Yeah, well, there should be a part 2. Nicole Luongo asked you. Well, we should ask Tal's attorney, Deanna Paul. I hope I'm pronouncing that right because she spells it funny. But what's it like for you to put down essentially women who are coming forward? That must be a little tough to sleep at night, but that's an interesting career choice. Let's leave it at that. Ronald, to you. Right now, the number, as far as we know, stands at about 42 accusers coming forward. When this is all said and done, you have a projection, a guesstimate on what that number will be at? We see with Sean Diddy Combs, it's like every day. It's if it's Monday, it's a new lawsuit. So, what do you think happens here?
Well, they've had a lot of women in their social circle over the years. It's hard. It could go up into the hundreds.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I am here in Miami Beach, and some of the stories that I'm hearing, I think they're going to start to trickle out, but they are difficult to wrap your head around. Let's just put it that way. And apparently it's been going on for many, many years. So this is the new suit that was recently filed, and it states, so we're going to go through this. In January 2021, defendant Tal Alexander lured plaintiff under false pretenses into an isolated room in Alexander's home and proceeded to pin plaintiff down with his body weight, forced himself on her, and violently essayed her, all while the plaintiff protested and attempted to fight him off. And it follows here. This is when this new suit was filed against Tall and Orrin Alexander. The victim, only known as ES, was on an extended visit to Miami, Florida, and on June 23rd, 2021, she was invited to a party hosted by the Alexander brothers. Tall and Orrin lured her to a bedroom under the false pretenses of a house tour, a common ruse they have used with many victims. I mean, Maria, to you, Orrin, according to your story, DMs you just one day on Facebook. You don't know the guy. He's, as they say, slid into your DMs and then invites you to on a date at dinner first, sushi place, Zuma. And when you show up there's 10 women. So again, you're in reading this, that, you know, she was invited to a party and under the guise of getting a tour of the house. This seems to have been their MO. When you read this, does it kind of put you back in that mindset where this guy basically lured you in with really bad intentions?
It does. It sounds just like my story. It was like you were reading my story. It's crazy. That's what they do. They lure the women to a place, a private place, and that's when the attack happens.
So just going back here, Jordan, back to this slide, and there's a couple more. Look, it says right here, Tall lures the plaintiff under false pretenses, pins her down with his body weight. These guys are guys who worked out of the gym in shape, forces himself on her, violently essays her. You see this through a different lens, obviously, as an attorney. So when you're reading this, what is going through your mind?
Well, I mean, first, I'm a human being. And so just reading it is, you know, no matter how many times you read something similar, it's deeply disturbing. And I obviously feel terribly for, you know, any survivor who went through something like this. But yeah, I mean, you know, you from a legal perspective, you look at it and, you know, clearly if, you know, as she's describing it in the complaint, I mean, this doesn't sound anywhere close to a consensual, you know, encounter. And so, I mean, this certainly sounds like a viable claim. I mean, I haven't seen, you know, I always like to look for corroboration, et cetera, et cetera. But like I said, you know, you don't always have the benefit of that. And, you know, this certainly seems to be in line with, you know, what we've heard from Maria and dozens of other women.
Yeah. There's a question from Sophia about the father. And let's put it this way. I've heard that he's not that dissimilar from the stories we're hearing. I'll leave it at that. Ronald Richards, to you, you know, this, you see here, this lawsuit falls within the statute of limitations. The alleged crime occurred in 2021, so that should not be a problem. I'm just thinking and talking to Jordan, if you take on a case like this, Ronald, and I don't know if you do or not, but if you do, what kind of interview process do you have with these alleged victims? Like, what do you have to do on your end to corroborate the victim's facts?
Well, you need to pull sort of all the electronic evidence from that night and try to figure out what happened, where were, you know, a lot of people, can you hear me okay, by the way?
Yep. Yeah. You're great. You're
okay.
Great now.
Yeah. A lot of people don't remember what they did yesterday. So when you're trying to put together an allegation, you need to like figure out what evidence is there that this event occurred. Start with like the simple things, like where was everybody that night? And you need to then figure out who was there and understand what was really going on. But you're not going to get to interview the accuser. That's like the one thing you really shouldn't waste your time on. That's not going to happen. You don't get to do that. You could maybe, in a criminal case, you're definitely not going to get to do that. You got to build your case with other ways. In a civil case, of course, you get to take a deposition, but you need to really understand, like, how do they know this person, and a lot of times you'll find that there's a lot of clues as to how this sort of got to where they are. The allegations in the Florida case, it wasn't just like a first time meeting. There's a history there.
Yeah. Here's some more from the civil suit. Plaintiff ES just identified it as ES as an adult female whose name is not contained in the complaint to protect her privacy. It goes on, obviously. Jordan, back to you. Is the goal here to settle? Because I always feel like with a settlement, you're really not getting true justice necessarily. How do you view that? Do you want this to go before a jury? So there's actually kind of the voice of a jury of the victim's peers who are either, believing the victim or believing the defendants.
Well, I'm a firm believer that in order to get the best settlement, you have to be willing to go to trial. So when we take on a case, we are willing to take it all the way to trial. But my ultimate goal and my ultimate purpose and my ultimate ethical obligation is to do what's in the best interest of the client. And so if the best interest of the client is taking a settlement, and that's what the client wants after having an informed discussion with the client, then I'm all for that. Otherwise, if it's not a good settlement, we're prepared to go to trial. So I think it's a case by case decision. In our experience, an overwhelming majority of these cases settle. I was fortunate enough to have the largest contested compensatory jury verdict against an institution in New York State history. So we have that.
What can you tell us what that was and against who?
Yeah, sure. It was Gloria G. It was a case in Westchester versus Mount Vernon School District. And it was a case of a 14-year-old who was sexually abused, off school grounds, but there was indicia of a problem on school grounds. And yeah, we tried the case in Westchester back in November and December of 2018.
Wow. Kudos to you. Ronald, this is a very intriguing question. By the way, if you appreciate the content here, please hit the like button, hit it anyway, even if you don't. Please subscribe either way. We've got a Patreon page. There's links in there that goes a long way in supporting the content that we put out on a daily basis. Tomorrow, got some kid duty in the evening. So I'm doing a noon show, and it's going to be on Ronald Richards, the woman accused of killing her husband with 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl out of the great state of Utah. We're going to be talking that. And then I'm joining the COE tomorrow on the second channel. We're going to be discussing Maddie Soto at 2:00. Sherry Douglas to Ronald. If they find evidence that the parents helped cover up these assaults, can they be not convicted, but can they be charged, I guess, with any sorts of crimes? Ronald, what if there is evidence that they were hiding evidence or, deflecting or whatever it might be? When can they become criminally or civilly culpable here?
Well, if there's obstruction, which is a very elastic criminal term, or if there's aiding and abetting the crimes themselves, or aiding and abetting concealment of evidence, that the parents could, the parents, without waiving any privilege, I know people that spoke to them over the weekend. I mean, they're in a very adamant state of there's no evidence. So, they have the same strong views that are beyond just parents supporting their kids. They're kind of not realistic that there's no evidence. There's a lot of evidence, and you don't need, the victim's testimony as evidence, and their experience as evidence, and what they had happened to them as evidence. But they want to take the position there's no evidence. because there's no video of the incident. But, there was video recovered from one of the apartments in New York, and there's a lot of different things that they're putting together. But I will tell you, I don't believe any of these civil cases are going to go to trial because there's just too many of them. And the kids don't have that kind of assets. They have some assets, but a lot of the money is the parents. I anticipate or predict a bankruptcy in the near future. And they have list pendences on all their properties. I put this out earlier on the weekend.
Yeah, Ronald, explain what is a list pendants. Explain what that is, because one of the other issues is now there's a company called Side that's suing Official, which is the name of the brothers' agency that they formed. But now there are all these business suits. So what is that, Ronald?
They had borrowed money from this real estate company that they had been a part of, and they didn't pay it. So a federal judge issued an injunction in Northern District of California, and then they recorded it in Florida and clouded the title of the remaining beachfront properties. So unless they pay them, those properties aren't going to be sold. And, the government restitution, if they're convicted, is going to be astronomical. And they're not going to be able to defend themselves from prison. It's very difficult to do that, especially with a conviction. So there's just too many cases. So one thing we've done in the past is try to split up, give each person some money, because if they keep all chasing them, it's not going to make any economic sense, and that they may be better off putting a fund together. They had, $115 million for bail. I'm sure the plaintiff's lawyers would be able to explain to their clients, look, it's better we all get something than fight each other in a race to the courthouse, because everybody's going to tell you, they have a good case. And I think that it may be better to come up with a practical solution here than just have this go on and on, because they can't defend 42 civil suits. It's frankly too expensive, even for them.
Yeah. A quick point for you, Ronald, because I know you are in touch with people. I have to say, on my end, whomever I speak to tells me that the dad is a bit unhinged. It sounds like he and the mother are in denial right now, saying there's no evidence, when the SDNY, which has I think a 98% conviction rate, has in court documents said that they have evidence. So I don't think that they would be messing around with that. But my question to you, you hear, well, the brothers are these uber successful real estate guys on private jets and all this. Realistically, if you had to put a dollar amount, what would you say the brothers are worth? And I think you alluded to the fact that you think the parents are worth more. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't think the brothers are worth anywhere close to what the parents are worth. And I think that the brothers, soaking wet are $30-40 million of real estate that has liens on it. I think the parents own the company. They live where the Kushners live. I mean, they're just not, the parents are not the children. And so unless you could tie them in, they may start getting sued if their fingerprints get close to this, but I don't think they will. But the reality is the kids have a couple spec houses, and they've disassociated their real estate license. They're not making any money, and so they have an apartment in New York. His wife filed for what I think is a tactical divorce. Tall's wife. It's pending now in New York. So, she's going to get a piece of that division. So that's what's going on. I think that you're going to see this type of stunts being pulled now, and the properties have loans on them. So like I said, realistically, they need to put a fund together and meet with all the plaintiffs' counsel and come up with a realistic solution. Otherwise, everyone's just going to be litigating. And in Florida, you have a homestead exemption. So it's not like you're going to take their house.
Yeah. A few more minutes, and then we're gonna get some final thoughts. Again, thanks to the two attorneys here, and of course Maria, who says that Orrin attacked her in the Versace mansion here in Miami Beach, where I am sitting. Jordan, to you, it might be a moot point actually, because these guys might be spending many years in prison. But to Ronald's point, do these brothers end up broke when this is all said and done?
Well, I mean, we don't have a good understanding of their, wealth, but if it is in accord with what Ronald says, and that's similar to, I really apologize for that. And if it's, what's going to happen as soon as I go off, as soon as I'm done with this, I'm never going to be able to get it. It's going to go off and I'm never going to be able to get it back on.
We have people who I guess are not, what's the word? They're just highly affected by weird noises. So I always get the hate mail, but I'll take it.
I'm sorry.
On your behalf. No worries.
The hate mail. It's my technological incapability.
I'm with you on that, but go ahead there. I mean, are they going to be penniless is the question.
So if I had to answer that in one word, I would say yes, but I think Ronald's suggestion is probably their best way of avoiding that fate, because, I mean, if you have 40 cases, right, what is the value of being, essayed, right? I mean, you could have if they have 40 cases against them, and let's suppose they win 30 of 40, which,
by the way, not to interrupt, I try not to, but that's a great point. How do you value an essay?
Well, we do it every day. So, there are certain values for cases. No two cases are the same, of course, but depending on what happened, the frequency, the age, the impact on the survivor. These are all things that we take into account. Is psychiatric treatment needed? Usually it is. Is there a lost earnings component, etc.? But kind of my point was, if you have 40 cases, and even if they win 30 out of 40, which would be extraordinary, I don't see that ever happening. They'd be lucky to win half of the. And again, I haven't evaluated every single one of these claims, but I'm assuming, given that they've been brought by, for the most part, what I've seen, very competent attorneys, such as Evan Torgan. He's a great lawyer here in New York, who has a lot of these cases. They're never winning half. If they won a third, it would be remarkable. So if you even have, but let's suppose somehow, some way, they won 30 of these cases out of the 40, those 10 cases are probably worth more than $40 million. Assuming, there's documentation and there's this and there's that. But we, on our Gloria Grant case in Westchester, in our Gloria G case, we hit for $28 million, and that was one victim. So if you have two of those, you're sunk. So I think Ronald's suggestion is probably their best bet. And the sooner they did it, or they do it, the better off they'll be, because, for someone like myself or Evan Torgan, if you get to the courthouse steps on any one of these cases, it's much less desirable to settle, because you're probably going to get more from a jury than you are in a settlement.
That's fascinating. There's two more graphics I just want to run through. The next two are little triggering, warning. One of them is a little redundant, but triggering. And then the last one is pretty graphic in nature. This is a public document, though. This is a civil suit. Let me get rid of this and bring this up. So once plaintiff realized Tal had led her straight into a bedroom, isolated from all other guests, she became uncomfortable and told Tal she needed to use the ensuite bathroom. After waiting a few minutes, plaintiff exited the bathroom and suggested to Tal that they continue the tour to the next part of the house. Before plaintiff could make her way to the bedroom door, however, Tal grabbed her, threw her onto the bed, pinned her down with his body weight, and physically forced himself on her. Plaintiff attempted to fight back against Tal's advances and push his body off her so she could escape, but his weight overpowered her. She had no way out. Maria, to you, this is exactly what you said. In the Watchtower in Versace Mansion, he pinned you down, and these are strong guys. You couldn't move, right?
Yes, I couldn't move. He was very, very strong. No matter what I did and try to push him off, I couldn't.
I know I'm not supposed to ask a woman this, but how tall are you? Can you roughly your weight, just so we get an idea? Don't yell.
5'8", 125.
There you go, 5'8", 125. And this is a guy who is taller. At least Oren is said to be 6'1", 6'2", in that range. And my guess is, I don't know, 190 pounds. So it's a definite disadvantage. This is the final graphic here. This one gets a little more into detail. So if it triggers you, please take note. And here we go. Plaintiff's experience shares similarities with other victims, aka Maria, of the Alexander brothers who have come forward. For example, the plaintiff in a June 2024 lawsuit alleged Oren brought her to his and Tal's New York City apartment, where Tal and Alone ambushed her, forcibly groping her and attempting to R her while she begged them to stop, all while Oren watched. The same woman also alleged that years after the assault, Tal barged in on her while she was alone in a guest room at a mutual friend's social event and attempted to essay her again before she managed to escape by screaming so loud other guests could hear her. Jordan, this is really disturbing. I mean, to me, one of the more disturbing parts, too, is that she's begging them to stop and that the other twin, Oren, is watching his brother, both brothers. Again, I mean, I'll go back to the point I made earlier. If this ever got to a jury trial and you've got a victim up there giving this testimony and it's heartfelt, there's just, the defendant is hopeless. But when you read this, again, what is running through your attorney mind?
Well, again, I'm a human, so that isn't my first response. But to answer your question, I think you hit the nail on the head. I honestly don't think I could say it better than you did. I mean, hearing that, for a jury to hear that, unless you have some significantly pro-defense, we don't like survivor type jurors, you know, anyone would feel, I would think, sympathy for this woman and what she went through. And again, you don't know what, sort of things they could try to do to undermine her credibility and cross-examine her. But even if they do so, and this is kind of my point, what would you award that woman, right? Like, you're obviously very close to the cause, so you might not be a good person to ask, but go up to a couple of people on the street and ask them. Usually a lot of times what I'll do is I'll ask our interns, what do you think of this case? Because they're not as, used to hearing about this stuff. And many times you don't even get words. You get just a visceral, my goodness. And so that's why, I think Ronald's approach was probably pragmatic. We always try to pursue our cases individually and try and do the best we can for our clients individually. But if I was looking at this from their camp, which I'm very happy I'm not, it's not sustainable.
It's been a fascinating conversation. I am intrigued with Jordan Merson, who hope comes back. Ronald Richards, he is a Beverly Hills, California-based criminal defense and civil litigation attorney who's made national media appearances as a legal expert, and he is covering this case in his own right, his own way. He does a lot of it on Instagram and Twitter. On Instagram, it is at Attorney Ronald Richards. On Twitter, X, it is at just Ronald Richards. So Ronald, to you, again, you broke this news that it appears that the Alexander brothers have canned their Miami defense attorneys. They're now searching for New York City attorneys who can handle their federal case. And this hearing that was supposed to happen Wednesday, they're now asking for it to be pushed to mid-February. They've got just a few weeks then to find some attorneys up there. There's a lot of good attorneys in New York City. But what should we expect at this hearing with the three brothers when it actually takes place? and your final thoughts. Ronald, that one's for you. If you're,
we should expect the judge to set a trial date.
And what do you anticipate for a trial date?
You should expect the judge to set a trial date. I mean, I would say the judge, she already indicated it's not going to be long. She'll probably set it in 6 months.
I mean, that's crazy fast. They don't even have attorneys apparently. So if you're Ronald, if you're retained, and I'm not saying you're going to be, but if you were retained as a criminal defense attorney to defend the Alexander brothers and you have 6 months, what are you doing to make your case as strong as possible?
Well, let's be clear. I wouldn't want to get retained for a case like this. We don't have to take every case.
Good for you.
You know, I don't mind representing people that are entitled to prove, you know, make the government prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. But I'm not just going to represent someone because they're rich and they can afford me, but I know that they're completely factually guilty, and I'm just going to represent them because they're paying me. I have to have some personal moral compass in it. I mean, I won't. There's a few types of cases I won't do. You know, animal abuse cases, environmental pollution, and multiple sex crime victims, because I've done many like this. And the one time I got somebody off, I was very happy for the client, but I wasn't happy for the accusers. And I just, over time, it's not the type of, of course we're here to defend the client, but that doesn't mean that we have to take every case. And I just wouldn't want to lend my skill set based on the evidence I've seen. It's undisputed that there was coordinated efforts to give women drugs here that would impair their consent. And, I've never seen a case like this, familiar coordinated, essay assaults. I mean, it's an unusual fact pattern, to say the least. And it also is a disappointment to that people with resources would spend their time, trying to figure out what's the easiest way to lure women to parties or to isolated areas where they could take advantage of them. I mean, anybody that has a daughter. That's why I pursued Joe Francis for so many years and represented Abby Wilson, because it's people like that I would never represent. Girls Gone Wild. And so there's certain people that that they need to be punished. Like they got wealthy and they abused that wealth to a level that society just can't recognize. And just because you're a lawyer doesn't mean you should take that case. I mean, that anybody that is a lawyer, I'm sure Jordan will agree, he just won't take any case just because someone is going to pay him. I mean, you have to have some sort of belief in the righteousness. And in this case, and I've studied it from the first filing, I just can't see any redeeming basis that I would want to, God forbid, use my superior skill set and just help them get away with this type of, these type of crimes. I mean, I just wouldn't be comfortable with that.
By the way, I don't think I've ever heard a lawyer say it quite that way. That's impressive. From Lee here, thank you for going after Joe Francis. For those who do not know, he's the Girls Gone Wild guy. Whatever happened to him, Ronald?
He's a fugitive. I have 2 warrants that I've helped get it issued. He hid in Mexico for many years. He's still there. He's a fugitive, and I helped the woman that had 2 twin girls with him escape and go to Oklahoma. And he tried to kidnap her there, and she's living there. And I helped her family law team make sure she got full custody of her young girls.
Hold on, have the marshals gone after him?
Well, they can't. He's in Mexico. He won't come back.
Another wonderful gentleman. Wow.
But I mean, at some point, and again, I'm not in any way trying to delineate between males and females, but really, like, if you're a father and you have girls, you just have to really like appreciate any of these victims could be your daughter, and you need to understand that people make mistakes, especially when they're young, and they get, the fact that someone could take advantage like this, and younger women aren't always so careful about coordinated efforts to give them intoxicants, and when it's on like a level to this level where the whole goal is to get girls and younger women in a very vulnerable position, and then to threaten them if they're going to make a complaint. I mean, these are horrific allegations that you really need to take a step back and recognize that there is some people in this world that need to go to prison for a very long time and pay a lot of money for damages, and that you can't just as a lawyer say, well, I'm going to represent them because they paid me, and call everybody a liar. I mean, at some point, that like I said, if I was defending them, I would, just like when I've done third time DUIs, I don't go to the judge or the prosecutor or the victim's family and say, make something up. We try to mitigate that and accept responsibility and explain that there is a redeeming life here, but we want to be punished, but not forever. And then, at least people are more sympathetic to try to get to a resolution. That's why I suggested, a fund. They have plenty of money. If they put a fund together, I'm sure they would have many of the victims with an apology testifying at their sentencing that at least they did the right thing and the parents helped right a wrong. I don't understand, if they have $150 million for bail, why not? And Kobe Bryant did this to some degree, with his settlement. I mean, it's not the first time. You can make a mistake and then try to fix it with a resolution. And then you'll find, like, you'll have 30, 40 plaintiffs lawyers saying, we made a settlement. There's no, they can talk about it, but they've tried to fix the wrong. And my client at this point would like to recommend a non-life sentence. We would be in favor of X amount of years. And there's a way to do things instead of just saying everybody's making it up, because 42 people are not making it up. There's somewhere in the middle, there's some validity here. And so I think that that it's unfortunate that the way this has been dealt with is everybody's a liar. I mean, because the type of women that they prey on may be women that are trustworthy and say, okay, the guys are successful. I'm going to his house. Who would think if you're going to a house on Flamingo Road in Miami Beach, you're going to get trapped in an upstairs room and R'd and SA'd? I mean, not everybody that does, like, you may not think that, and you may tell your parents, hey, I'm going to this guy's house. He's having a party. He's a well-known realtor. And then this horrific thing happens and you don't know what to do. And you don't remember clearly because you were drugged and you were given this drug when you were told it's this drug. I mean, I've seen this story so many times, and you can't just then call everyone a bunch of names. The names that assailants call them, that they're H's and S's and all the names that you hear people call to try to diminish the claim of the victim. And there's a way to have, like, if I was trying to settle a case with Jordan, I'd say, Jordan, look at, you have a he said, he said, here's your client's background. Let's allocate the risk. Let's come up with a compromise. I would try to enlist Jordan to help me say, look, maybe my client, there is some problems with my case. Let's come up with a resolution here where it could be a positive for everybody, rather than just go on this crazy attack that has been a utmost public relations failure, a bail failure. I mean, it's kind of silly to suggest that nothing at all happened. Everybody's lying about everything. That's just never going to fly. And as Jordan correctly said, you're never going 42 to 42. You're never going to convince 42 different jurors that nothing happened by preponderance of the evidence. In the criminal case, of course, there's going to be a superseding indictment with, so many victims. Their heads are going to spin. That's why they need to focus that their behavior is now exposed, and just recognize it. It'll go so much better for them if they came up with a practical solution. That's who I'd be reaching out first, is their defense go to all these plaintiffs and say, look, we feel terrible. The parents feel terrible. We want to fix it. And then you're going to have like 40 lawyers that are going to help you, actually. And the victims may forgive you at some point in the future because you're trying to do something rather than forcing them to testify, impeaching their credibility and trying to fix a problem. You have resources, use them, other than just this crazy denial. And that's really, I see these cases always happen like this, and the story's always the same. You're not going to, and it's a sad state of affairs that no one can ever think outside the box that, you did this. I mean, you had these people over. I mean, the latest Miami case is a house that they owned and they sold just last year. I mean, she didn't make it up. She was there. I mean, those facts have been checked, and there's text messages and corroboration. I mean, I don't know. I mean, these are like people that they had no relationship with, a lot of them, and then they're ending up having sexual intercourse with them or some other sort of assault, and it shouldn't be a surprise that now they're being accused of this when everyone feels now emboldened that they're not going to be investigated by their security company. I mean, the litany of threats on the victims is very large in this case. So you have to have sympathy. As Jordan said, I agree. I mean, as a human being, I would never want my nieces or anybody else in my family ever subjected to this. So you can't just downplay what these women are going through, because it's never going to be a perfect story. Just like in the Jay-Z case, they tried to dismiss it on a Rule 11, and they put a very good opposition to the Rule 11, and the victim's like, look, I can't remember every single thing. My God, it's 12 years ago. I was traumatized. These grown men were all over me. I mean, you don't realize the horror of these things until, from my vantage point, I've represented these perpetrators, and, of course, not every perpetrator is guilty, but when you're representing a guilty person, you don't ask them, did you do it? But you talk to them and you get the facts where they can't give you exculpatory facts, and they did it. So you have to live with that. I mean, I've been doing this 30 years. I'm just not interested in getting any more of them a mitigating sentence or helping them get off of these. But if they were smart and wanted to recognize their conduct and come up with a sensible solution so everybody's not just left with nothing, that's what I'd be in favor of is recognizing culpability and accountability.
Yeah, well, Ronald, I'm glad that you said that, and it's good to hear a criminal defense attorney say that. Big thanks as well to Jordan Merson, very capable attorney out of New York City, my former home, and he is representing a victim who's a Jane Doe at this point, unidentified, against the Alexander brothers. I'm sure he'll be representing more along the way, and he has represented other clients against the likes of Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby, Larry Nassar. The list goes on. Jordan, I like your whole being. It's interesting. I got to ask you, do you have an interesting hobby? What do you do outside of lawyering?
I mean, I spend time with my family. That's pretty much, I practice law a lot of the time. I work very significant hours. So, and I will be doing so, especially because we have an upcoming deadline in New York. The litigated in the decision we were talking about, the Victims of Gender Motivated Violence Act, the window for that ends on March 1st. So you have to get your claims filed by February 28th of this year. So in, 31 days. So over the next 31 days, I'm not going to really have time for any hobbies. And maybe after that, I'll have a little bit of time.
Are you a Yankees fan, a Mets fan?
I'm a big Yankees fan.
There you go. All right. So there you go. Big Yankees fan. I got it out of him. There you go. Big Yankees fan. Well, good luck to you with all this. And obviously, please send our regards to your victim in this, who is going up against a mighty team.
And I also just wanted to introduce Kara Zealous, who's been working on the case with me. I wanted her to get credit as well. So
Kara, you come on to the show next time. We'll get rid of Jordan. We'll bring you on, okay?
I could never replace.
All right. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Kara. Final word goes to Maria. She says that Oren attacked her in the Versace mansion watchtower. Maria, you just heard from two really amazing attorneys, one representing one of the alleged victims, and of course Ronald, who's done this work for many years. Did it help to hear this? What are your final thoughts tonight?
Oh, yes. What Ronald had said was, wow, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. You're amazing, Ronald, and as well, Jordan, both of you. So thank you very much on behalf of the victims, the survivors, I would say.
Yeah, and Maria, you and I are going to stay in close touch, and we will get you back on the show, and the platform is yours. If there are any other, people who are accusing the Alexanders of this, please feel free to reach out, survivingthesurvivor@gmail.com. We advocate for victims here, and we will get you on Surviving the Survivor. This platform is yours if you need it. We will see you tomorrow at noon doing Corey Richards. Love you, America. Love you, Beverly Hills, where they say $30-40 million is not that much. Love you, New York City, and the great state of Florida, which is, I believe, where Maria is, and everyone else around the world. Guests, if you can, please stick around for 1 second, and we will see you tomorrow at noon. Don't forget, the second channel launches tomorrow. If you love it, thank the COE. If you hate it, thank the COE. See you tomorrow.